Hi friends, this is Dr. Richard Ruling here to welcome you to the Breaking News channel, spelled breaking with a B-R-A-K-I-N-G. Put the brakes on for some things. Yes, Ellen White was 120 years ahead of Conrad Vine and Ron Kelly, who are appealing the General Conference apostasy as they seek UN and government support, etc. Um, Interesting stuff on the internet, and I'll have a link below in the description that you should really take a listen to, as Conrad Vine is quite articulate and able to show amazing information. I was shocked really at some of it uh, but I don't want to spoil it for you. It's if you put the gear speed at like 1.25 or 1.5, you can hear all of his stuff in less than 20 minutes in the video that I have linked. And I'd say well worth the time because, I'll just, I'm going to start with Ellen White because she was 100 years and 20 ahead. I think Noah preached 120. Things are about to happen, okay? The point is that Ellen White recognized a message by pastors Jones and Wagner, who came to the General Conference in 1888. And she went with them to camp meetings to agitate the truth when church leaders rejected it. Well, they asked her to go to Australia really to get rid of her. Okay, and she wrote some of her best books there and started Avondale College. Returned a decade later, 1901, to appeal for a reorganization of the General Conference. Well, they voted it, but they never did it. And in 1903, 2 years later, they voted a hierarchical structure organization like the Catholic Church. 5 levels. Just like the Catholic Church has priests, bishops, archbishops, cardinals, and pope, our church has pastors and presidents of conferences, unions, divisions, and general conference pope who travels the world like the pope does. Ellen White did not have in mind that the general conference president would go to Australia or different continents and tell them how to do it. The people in Latin America, those conferences, or we call them unions now, could get together and tell what's working in their area. They don't need someone from the United States to come and tell them. And the same for other areas as well. But we have got a system that her response was in, this is Testimonies for the Church, Volume 8, page 250. How has the faithful city become a harlot? My Father's house is made a house of merchandise, a place whence the divine presence and glory have departed. Past tense, it's gone. Okay. Wow, that's huge, but I see what Conrad Vine is saying, and yes, we did it. We became focused on money in this church. We think we are rich and increased with goods by the millions, not the millions. 1,000 millions is a billion, and we're getting over 12 billion from Medicare and Medicaid. Our hospitals are generating that, but we're in business with pharmakia, which deceives all nations. In Revelation 18, verse 23, we don't see it that way because it's badly translated as sorcery. Sorcery deceives all nations. We don't see sorcery deceiving all nations. We don't see it anywhere today, hardly, maybe, but pharmakia, yeah, that's everywhere. And we think that's healthcare, when really it is not healthcare. It is medical care with drugs. And those drugs have an adverse reaction. Thick book, Physician's Desk Reference, 3,500 pages, all the things it can do to you. My former wife died from a prescription drug reaction, okay, and I remarried a woman whose former husband also died of the same antibiotic. You know, it's more common than you would guess, but most people don't have a physician's desk reference to look in there and find out, yeah, that Cipro antibiotic can cause platelet disorder, can cause strokes. Yes, she died that way. Okay, I'm just, forgive me, but we thought somehow we could do better with getting AMA accreditation, and so church leaders took Ellen White's school. She had paid the $5,000 deposit for a school that she could have to teach natural remedies to missionaries. Now we're not sending many missionaries, and they don't know the natural remedies. I feel cheated now as I look back on my medical education that I didn't get the kind of education Ellen White wanted. Okay, but that's the way it is. You can't change history, but and I struggle to understand what she meant when she said drugs change the form and location. Um, but that's what an adverse drug reaction is, and it's a leading cause of illness and death today. I have the medical literature to prove it. But when you take something for a bladder infection and it wipes out your platelets and you die of a stroke, it changed the form and location of the disease. So and bottom line is though that we are up to our ears in pharmakia linked to Babylon, because Revelation 18 is a call to come out of Babylon, partake not of her sins, receive not of her plagues, for by her sorceries were the nations deceived. I'm sorry, it's not sorceries. Bad translation by translators. It says pharmakia, for by her pharmakia were all nations deceived. If we should understand that better than sorceries, because it's everywhere in our quote Adventist health system that's not health, it's about medical care and money. So anyway, and forgive me if I'm an independent ministry. They just also badmouth the ministry, independent ministry. They want supporting ministries. Send us your tithe. When they get 97% of their funds from the government with Medicare and Medicaid, and only 3% from tithe anyway. And they're not helping some pastors in Africa, which is why I send some money there. But anyway, long story short, it's not a good situation for today. And take a look at Conrad Vine's video. I'm seeing that judgment is impending. Noah preached 120 years. Ellen White's counsel on this was 120 years ago. And she said when they incorporated wrongly, we cannot step off the platform that God established, for that would be apostasy from the truth. That's in second book of Selected Messages, page 390. But they did it anyway in 1904. They incorporated those changes, linking us governmentally, and we can't back out. We like the free money by the billions, okay, as Conrad Vine shows, even mandating a bad shot so that it's not a matter of conscience. They're not protecting our liberty of conscience to choose. They forced people that were under the employment of the denomination to get the shot. Sad, sad. We are in apostasy. In fact, Ellen White said so in Special Testimonies Series B, number 7. She said the apostasy which is developing and increasing will continue until the Lord descends from heaven with a shout. Okay. And I can send you the link if you want to send me an email so you can find it. But I have it linked below. Okay, so you don't need to write me. Anyway, judgment is impending. You might wonder, how do we get there? Well, God isn't wanting to punish everybody every time they sin or do something wrong. That would make him a whipping boy, and we would run from God. He wants us to make our own mind. Christ died to give us free choice. Okay. And so he doesn't always make it look like he's doing it. So the bottom line is, and by the way, when Christ was asked about the end of the world, he said to understand the book of Daniel, Daniel's 8th chapter has a vision at the time of the end, verse 17, vision at the time of the end, but it's not 1844 like we thought. It's the Kazone vision of ram and goat. There are two visions in that chapter, and if you get a concordance and look at the words for the ram and goat, it's a Kazone vision and of conflict. And the horns on the ram are the kings of Media and Persia that today are Iraq and Iran. And we did Iraq. Okay, I actually learned about this on a way to a prophecy conference 35 years ago with a friend, Charles Wheeling, who invited me to go because I was buying a lot of books, Ministry of Healing, from him for my health seminars I was doing. And I was shocked at the things that I learned about that God had a name. And, I'm learned since then that it really isn't Yahweh, even though the Jews think so. I'll get to that later maybe. But the idea is there's a lot of truth that we aren't understanding from Bible. Christ reflected this when he said, beware the leaven of the Pharisees, meaning their doctrines. This is Matthew 16th chapter, verse 11 and 12. Their doctrines were leavened or made light. We have that today. Preachers make a message so easy that you can swallow it without chewing it. You know, mentally, no mental action is needed. It just sounds all good, you know. Well, that's not what God wanted. And he said in the next chapter, Christ did, that before he comes, Elijah or Elias, there was no J in Hebrew, is Eliah was to come first and restore all things. Well, we might wonder, and I've asked people, what are the all things? I never get an answer on that, but I think I know. Okay, this is my conjecture, that when you go to Malachi 4, verse 4 and 5, it's remember the law of Moses with the statutes and judgments. Behold, I send you Elijah. Those statutes and judgments have a sevenfold emphasis in Ezekiel 20. We like Ezekiel 20, verse 12 and 20, because the Sabbath is a sign. We quote it that way. Misquote, really. It's Sabbaths with an S, okay? And it's statutes, judgments, Sabbaths. Statutes, judgments, Sabbath. Statutes. 7 times you find statutes and judgments there, and they're linked to Sabbaths, I believe, as a sign of God's people. But we kick the S off of Sabbaths. We don't want the annual Sabbaths for some stupid reason, in my opinion, when God intended it for good. When he gave Israel 7 feast days. Feast. I wondered for years why they call it feast. Well, they killed a lamb and could feast on it all week long when they were in Jerusalem, and it was a time of intellectual feast, teaching, and fellowship with their friends that they didn't ordinarily get to see because they didn't have cell phones and cars and get together, everywhere. They worked hard on the farm 6 days, but often rested, maybe without a synagogue, etc. Some little towns did have teachings like that. But anyway, long story short, that's how it is today, that we have leavened teaching, and we need unleavened bread. As Christ said after he was baptized, the first words in red, if you have a red letter edition of the Bible, first words in red after he was anointed by the Spirit is, man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word of God. And I'm going to share with you a word that is tragically overlooked, and it is really in the best known prophecy or text in the New Testament, that God gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believes in him will not perish but have everlasting life. We don't understand the word begotten. But first of all, before I go there, I want to explain that when times of judgment come, Jews get it first. They don't believe that God gave his only begotten Son, and they're going to get driven out of Jerusalem and Israel, okay? Because, and favorite author Ellen White says in the book Education, page 123, that every prophecy is an explanation of some other prophecy. Well, how does that work? The Jews that are living in Israel today and Jerusalem have no interest in their spiritual heritage. They're just there for free land from the UN that they think it was free, but God is going to let the Muslims take them out. In Zechariah 14, verse 1 and 2, the day of the Lord comes, which is the end time period. It's not when he comes in the sky, because the book of Joel has more references than any other book, 5 references to day of the Lord, but no second coming. And the book of Daniel has 5 references to time of the end, but no second coming. It's the time of judgment, last 7 years, as we see in Revelation 11, verse 1 says, rise, measure the temple. It's the time of judgment. God is going to give power to his 2 witnesses for 1,260 days. That's 3.5 years. They have the power to shut the heavens. That's Elijah power. Power to turn water to blood. That's Moses' power. Just like Moses and Elijah came to Christ on Mount of Transfigurations. And then when they finish their testimony, it says the beast ascends to make war and overcome them. The beast gets power 42 months in Revelation 13, verse 5. It's through the UN that the beast has power. That's the Pope's road to supremacy is through the UN, because of so many Catholic nations that will vote his agenda. So that's impending for us, and that's why Trump was not liked, because he wasn't favoring UN. He wanted to make America great, not go under the UN. And he nearly lost his life, but God spared it. I think the devil was reading the Bible and trying to intercept Trump for the role that Christ, the God has for him. He's engraven as Cyrus II in Israel, an Israeli coin. Okay, well, Cyrus I, the first Cyrus in history, helped Israel return to their homeland, and I believe that Trump was going to do that for us as well. To appreciate that, you need to understand Ellen White's last book, that publishers, Pacific Press, tragically badly changed Ellen White's title that she gave to her last book. So we don't get the message, okay? You know her last book by the title Prophets and Kings, but that's not what she called her book. She titled it The Captivity and Restoration of Israel. And its meaning is seen clearly in Jeremiah 30, verse 3. God is speaking. He says, Lo, the days come, saith the Lord, I'll bring again the captivity of my people, Israel and Judah, and cause them to return to the land that I gave their fathers, and they shall possess it. Well, when you can't buy or sell or hide in this country, I don't want to be here at that point. And God says in Jeremiah 30, this is verse 11 though, it says, I will make a full end of all other nations, but I will not make a full end of you, but I'll correct you in measure. Well, I don't want to be here when the full end is made for America, which is probably like the head of gold that goes first in that series of Daniel. Daniel 2 and Daniel 7. It was Babylon that went first, and we are partaking of Babylon's wine, and in grave danger of what's coming. We need to understand the time of judgment, which first will get the Jews. When the Muslims take the Jews, it says in Zechariah 14, the city will be taken, houses rifled, women ravished, half the city goes into captivity. And then the Lord will go forth to fight against them, using the ram and goat. But also, he's got a double strategy, and this is one that we're not seeing. But, the messenger to Laodicea is blind in Revelation 3:17, and we think it's just way back then, that church of Laodicea, that ended in an earthquake. But guess what? When Muslims take the city, look out for Joel 3:16. They don't believe John 3:16. God gave his only begotten son, so they get Joel 3:16. Both Jews and Muslims get it. And when the Lord roars from Jerusalem, the heavens and earth will shake, and they will flee, as it says in Zechariah 14, verse 5. But that earthquake, guess what? Initiates the book of Revelation. The earthquake is encoded 4 different ways in Revelation. As a knock, most obviously, because the ancient church of Laodicea, where he knocked, ended in an earthquake. Okay? And is type and antitype. Ecclesiastes 3:15 in the New English Bible says, what is to come has been already. God summons each event back in its turn. So we're going to get an earthquake. And Ellen White saw it. Why? Because they hijacked her school to take it and teach drugs, pharmacology, to get AMA accreditation. She didn't want that. She told them no twice. But they did it anyway, and as I said before, I feel cheated with my education. I could have had something much better. The smartest men in the world came to Battle Creek for treatment without drugs at the Battle Creek Sanitarium and Hospital 100 years ago and more. Okay, drugs were poisons at that time. They were using mercury, calomel, arsenic, strychnine. And as science changed, they modified these chemicals so that they weren't so obviously poisonous, and they dealt with the symptoms that we have, but they changed the form and location, as Ellen White said. Today we know it as adverse drug reactions that are a leading cause of illness and death. I went through U.S. Senate offices in Washington, D.C. with medical literature to prove it. I couldn't do that if I didn't have the goods, until one senator said, you're wasting your time. They own us. Speaking of donations the drug companies gave to their reelection. And our church is owned, our leadership is owned the same way, by money. Okay? They love the billions they're getting, and our leaders sit on these boards of Medicare, Medicaid, medical boards, and so on, and they get generous gifts, just like pharmakia gifts to the senators for participating, and so they're stuck in money and bad history as far as I'm concerned, and they will get it when the heavens and earth shake. Loma Linda will be on the ground, and the message will be Babylon is fallen, because Babylon is linked to pharmakia in Revelation 18. Partake not of her sins, receive not of her plagues, for by her sorceries, or pharmakia is the Greek word, were all nations deceived. We are deceived by it, and we're deceiving people by calling it health care. It's medical care, diagnosis of treatment, diagnosis and treatment of disease with drugs that are a leading cause of illness and death. So that's the story, and it's only a little bit of time now. They're talking about having a general conference in St. Louis in early July. I don't think they're going to have that. I think big things happen. Christ said, no man knows the day or hour, but as the days of Noah. Okay, and all of those parables there between Matthew 24:30, when Christ comes in power and glory, and a chapter later, Matthew 25 and 30 or 31, when he comes in power and glory, there are 7 parables, and 6 of them are specific for Noah's time. After the parable of Noah's time, when the flood came with Passover timing in the 2nd spring month, the next parable begins, then shall 2 be in the field. Then is the same time as Noah. And each one has hooked together. The evil servant, I couldn't see any timing in the evil servant that begins to smite his fellow servants. But the next verse in Matthew 25, verse 1, then shall the King of heaven be like 10 virgins. And the 10 virgins, it says, watch, you don't know or you don't understand, for the kingdom of heaven is like a man traveling to a far country. That is a specific clue. I call it in a 9:11 warning, Numbers 9, verse 10 and 11, for Passover a month later. If a Israelite man took a long trip, couldn't get back in time for Passover, he was not excused. He was supposed to observe it a month later. And that's, it had Passover timing. Noah entered the ark on the 10th day. That's when he went in for safety. And that's though when people rejected his invitation to go into the ark, they were selecting themselves, just like in Exodus 12, verse 3. They selected a sacrifice on the 10th day, same day that Noah went into the ark. They were selecting themselves to be sacrificed when they didn't go in with Noah. That's how it had Passover timing. So I'm just saying, and by the way, those appointed times like Passover have, they are from Leviticus 23rd chapter. They're called feast days, but the last verse of that chapter calls them moed, appointed times. Are we going to keep our appointments? Ellen White said, the whole Jewish economy is full of instruction for us. Its impressive ceremonies were designed to teach the people that at the time appointed, one would come to whom that ceremony pointed. We don't have to do Jewish ceremonies, but I'll give you the example in Desire of Ages, page 652.2, second paragraph, Last Supper. As he, Christ, ate the Passover with his disciples, he instituted in its place the service that was to be the memorial of his great sacrifice. Well, if we did the Lord's Supper in place of Passover, we would be honoring God's appointed times, and we could be ready, especially if we would watch and pray after celebrating that, like he did with his disciples, watch and pray. The disciples lost it. They lost the kingdom, in my opinion, because they went to sleep. But I've learned, I used to go to sleep too, but I've learned how to do it. In Exodus 12, verse 10, the Jews ate the Passover lamb and left nothing to morning. Eating is stimulating. It keeps you awake, okay? And when I was in college at Washington Missionary College, the guy who drove the bus for class outings or for choir could drive all the way from Washington, D.C. to Florida without sleeping by eating one peanut at a time. Well, we don't have to eat peanuts and we don't have to eat lamb. Let's eat it spiritually by reading the closing scenes of Christ's life. I have done this with even non-Adventist people, invite them for the Lord's Supper and a spiritual exercise, reading the closing chapters, and they testify that it was a wonderful experience. We can do that, and we can stay awake at least till midnight, which is when in Egypt judgment fell on Egypt, and I'm looking for the knock that's going to take Loma Linda to the ground as judgment that is well deserved to a denomination that is so closed to truth that they've walked me out of a Sabbath school class or a church more than once, okay? Because you try to make a comment and they're closed to it, closed-minded. I think everything I've been sharing with you is clear, even the feast days, but the in specifically, I'm giving you scriptural support. In Matthew 22, the king makes a marriage for his son, and he sends his servants to bid people to a wedding feast. But the remnant, and that's what it says in Matthew 22, verse 6, in the King James Bible, the remnant scorn the invitation and even treat the messengers badly. It says kill them. I guess that's disfellowshipping because they don't care about you. They want to say go to hell, okay? Basically, that's what they say when they want to disfellowship you. They think if they're really doing this with right things, I should be afraid. But I'm not afraid because I'm looking at Scripture and I'm looking at their role with this bad, and they are going to get thrown out of the wedding feast. How? Yeah, well, it's the king sends his army and burns up their city. That will be Loma Linda. In Ellen White's vision of the earthquake at Loma Linda, she also mentioned San Francisco, which was destroyed, coincidentally at that time, but she wasn't talking about San Francisco. And by the way, San Francisco had more damage from fire, from disrupted gas lines. When the earthquake separates gas lines, fire ignites, and Loma Linda is going to burn as well. I had a friend tell me that, okay? So this is not a private interpretation. I knew him from an independent ministry sometime before, but the church doesn't want to think about independent ministries. But as Conrad said, he quoted, his new organization is called Needle to the Pole. My mother gave me a quarter to memorize the book Education, where it says, the greatest want of the world is the want of men who in their inmost souls are true and honest, men who do not fear to call sin by its right name, like in the General Conference, men whose conscience is true to duty as the needle to the pole, men who will stand for the right though the heavens fall. That's in the book Education, and we need to understand and stand for the right. And Ellen White says in One Selected Messages, I think it's page 411, that we should know what's being taught among us, and if it's right, we should take our stand with him with his side. I'm presenting to you truth that's going to come in the context of judgment to the church for its closure to truth. They are closed to the unleavened bread that could get us into the wedding feast, okay? And when Christ said, blessed are those servants whom his Lord find watching. He will gird himself, make them sit down to eat and serve them. The eating at that time, triple clues for Passover, has to include unleavened bread. They were to eat it at Passover. Israelites ate unleavened bread for 7 days when they left Egypt. Well, the weddings are 7 days in the Bible. Fulfill Leah's week, Laban said to Jacob when he married Leah. Okay, weddings are a week, and 7 days superimposed for unleavened topics for us to marry Christ as the bridegroom. And if we don't want it, I don't think he wants us to be the bride, because we could start trouble all over again like Israel did, worshiping a calf at Sinai. They didn't know that calf, by the way, it was called Baal. And do you know what the translation of Baal is? Lord. Okay, surprise. Okay, we don't worship a calf, but we call God by the same title. Now, Lord is a legitimate title from Adonai, a Hebrew word, but he also had a name, and it was in the Bible about 7,000 times. But if you turn to the Bible and you see Lord in all capital letters about 7,000 times, they got rid of God's name, even though they took it. Third commandment says, thou shalt not take the name of the Lord in vain. Well, they took it vain or empty, by emptying his name and calling it Lord. It's called a tetragrammaton, etc. There's more, but I want to see. I'm almost 29 minutes, half hour, almost out. I'm just saying there's a lot of truth that you ought to understand. And go to my website, Health, Happiness, and Destiny.com. And you see a book there, The Earthquake and Seven Seals, because the seven seals of Revelation 6 are contextually linked to these topics. I'll give you the first example right now, how John hears thunder. Thunder is linked to God's name. In John 12, verse 28 and 29, Christ prayed, Father, glorify your name, and the people standing around thought it thundered. And again in Revelation 14, verse 1, the 144,000 have the Father's name in the forehead, and the next verse has thunderings. So yes, God has a name, and it's not Jehovah. There was no J in Hebrew or Greek, and it's not Yahweh as Jews believe. That's close. That's 4 letters. But Josephus, who saw the golden crown at Jerusalem's destruction, they were bringing the temple furniture out. He saw the golden crown in which was engraven the sacred name. He said it consists of 4 vowels. Vowels are the music and melody of a word. When you hear a beautiful song, you're hearing a vowel, okay? But consonants, b, d, m, k, p, f, very boring language if we only had consonants, okay? And so we need the vowels, and God lends us his name. You wouldn't want God to have a name like Tom, Dick, or Harry. It's got to be different, and it is. It's got those beautiful vowels that give us a beautiful language and beautiful songs, and there's no obstruction in a vowel, like b, t, p. It's e or ah, okay? And so, and by the way, Eah, the prophet, that's the short form of God's name. Prophets came in God's name. It was Zephaniah, Obadiah, Zechariah, etc. You know, they had different meanings for those names. And by the way, one more thought on that, and that is Ellen White refers to as Christ and the disciples left the Last Supper, they went out and they sang a Hallel. A Hallel means praise. Hallelujah means praise to those vowels, u, e, ah, okay? And the Eah is first as the name short form. But they represent the Godhead, and I believe that there's more coming. Get my book, okay? It's, we spend hundreds of thousands of dollars in a lifetime for homes and cars and things like that. But this is a meal for your mind that can affect your destiny forever, okay? Because the man without a wedding garment is the pastor in Revelation 3:17 who is naked, okay? If you're naked, you don't have a wedding garment on, and thrown out into outer darkness with weeping and gnashing of teeth. That's where your pastor, I'd say you need to understand this so you can take if you love your pastor, you can take the truth to him before it's too late, and it's not long, okay? So go to the website, Health, Happiness, and Destiny.com, and the book in digital form costs you less than a Big Mac, okay? This is a meal for your mind, a Big Mac for your mind, etc. And less than a carton of cigarettes, which is even more. So God bless you. Thank you for it. And if you have any trouble, send me an email. I think my email is on the website somewhere, but it's my last name, Ruhling, Ruhhling. The one H is silent, so it's Luke 12:44 says he will make us ruler over all. I wanted to understand how I get to be a ruler if my name is Ruhling. But it's not about me. It's 144,000 that are virgins in Revelation 14:4. They must be the wise virgins to get in the wedding, and we can all do that. I believe that right now, and we should be the king's servants helping others to know in Matthew 22. Thank you so much. God bless you, and we'll see you again. Like and share this with others so that they can get the information as well.